This baby wouldn't stop crying, not for 1 minute, not for 1 hour. A billionaire tried everything: the best doctors, the best care, the best money could buy, but nothing worked. The entire plane was losing patience, until suddenly a poor girl stood up from the back. No one noticed her before, no one cared. And when she walked toward the baby, people didn't just doubt her, they were ready to throw her out. But what she did next shocked everyone on that plane, because in just a few seconds, she did something that millions of dollars couldn't. And what she revealed after that didn't just silence the baby, it exposed a truth that broke a billionaire completely. Everything inside the plane was perfect. Soft golden lighting, cream-colored leather seats, crystal glasses resting quietly on polished trays, and a silence so expensive only the ultra-rich could afford it. This wasn't a regular flight. This was a private luxury jet, a flying palace filled with power, money, and people who were used to getting exactly what they wanted. But that day, that perfect silence was shattered by a sound no one could control, a baby's cry. At first it was soft, a weak, trembling whimper, but within seconds it grew louder, sharper, more desperate. "Wahhhhhhh," heads turned. Eyebrows tightened. One man sighed loudly, adjusting his suit. "Is someone going to do something about that?" Another woman covered her ears slightly. "This is unbearable." The air hostess rushed forward, her professional smile barely hiding the tension. "Please remain calm, sir. We're handling it." But the truth was, no one was handling it. At the very front of the jet sat a man who looked like he owned the sky itself. Tailored black suit, perfect posture, cold, unreadable eyes. His name was Armin Khanna, a billionaire. A man who had built empires from nothing and crushed anyone who stood in his way. He didn't believe in problems, only solutions, but right now he had neither, because in his arms was his son. And the baby wouldn't stop crying, not for a second, not for a breath. It was as if something deep inside the child was broken and no amount of wealth could fix it. The air hostess stepped closer. "Sir, may I try?" Without even looking at her, Armin handed over the baby. "Fix it." One word, cold, sharp, final. She tried everything. Rocking him gently, whispering softly, offering a bottle, but the baby screamed even louder. Wah! Now the irritation in the cabin turned into open frustration. "This is ridiculous. We paid for peace, not this chaos. Do something." Armin closed his eyes tightly. For a moment, just a moment, his calm mask cracked, because that cry, it wasn't just noise. It was pain, and somehow it was reaching him. At the very back of the jet sat someone no one had noticed. A young girl, simple clothes, worn-out shoes, a small, faded bag resting on her lap. She didn't belong there, not in a place like this, not among people like them. To everyone else, she was invisible. But she wasn't looking at the passengers. She wasn't looking at the luxury. She was looking at the baby with deep, focused eyes. As if she wasn't just hearing the cry, she was understanding it. Minutes passed. The crying didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. The tension in the cabin thickened. And then the girl slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. She hesitated for a second, took a quiet breath, and stood up. As she walked forward, people began to notice. Their expressions changed instantly. Confusion, judgment, disapproval. "Excuse me," one passenger muttered. "Where do you think you're going?" An air hostess quickly stepped in front of her. "Ma'am, please return to your seat." But the girl spoke softly, almost gently. "Please let me try." The hostess blinked, unsure. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the air. Cold. Controlled, dangerous. "You." Armin Khanna was looking directly at her now, for the first time. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, measuring, judging, dismissing. As if her very presence was an insult to the world he lived in. A faint, almost mocking smirk touched his lips. "And what exactly do you think you can do that no one else can?" The cabin fell silent. Even the complaints stopped. All eyes were now on her. The girl didn't react to the tone. Didn't react to the arrogance. She simply looked at the baby and then back at Armin and said something that made the entire plane freeze. "He's not just crying, he's searching." A pause. A strange, heavy pause. Armin's eyes narrowed slightly. For the first time, there was something new in them, not anger, not arrogance, curiosity. The baby cried again, louder than ever, desperate. Broken, and the girl slowly stepped closer, raising her hands gently. "May I?" 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. No one moved, no one spoke, because deep down, something felt different. And then Armin made a decision. A small one, but one that would change everything. He nodded, just slightly. The girl reached out and took the baby into her arms. And in that exact moment, No one realized it yet, but the impossible was about to happen. The moment the baby left Armin Khanna's arms, the entire cabin held its breath. No one spoke. No one moved. It felt wrong, a girl like her holding the child of a billionaire. It didn't fit the world they believed in. She held the baby carefully, gently, as if she had done this 1,000 times before, but the baby was still crying, loud, sharp, uncontrollable. "Wahhhhhh?" A man in the corner shook his head. "This is pointless," a woman whispered to her companion. "Someone should stop her." Even one of the crew members stepped forward, tense. "Ma'am, I don't think this is appropriate," but before she could finish, the girl did something unexpected. She didn't rock the baby. She didn't try to silence him. Instead, she closed her eyes. Just for a second, and brought the baby closer to her chest. Not forcefully, not nervously, but with a strange, calm confidence. The crying didn't stop immediately, but something changed. It shifted. From loud screams to uneven sobs. "Ah, ah, ah," the girl opened her eyes again, and very softly she began to hum. It wasn't a famous song, it wasn't perfect. In fact, her voice was slightly rough, but it was warm, real, alive. A melody that didn't belong to luxury jets, but to small rooms, sleepless nights, and people who had learned to survive pain. The passengers looked at each other, confused, uncomfortable, because something strange was happening. The baby's cries were slowing down. "Wah, ah, ah." His tiny hands, which had been clenched tightly, began to relax. His breathing started to match the rhythm of her humming. Armin leaned forward slightly. His expression changed. Just a little. He didn't understand it. None of them did, because moments ago this child had been impossible to calm. The girl gently adjusted the baby in her arms, supporting his head perfectly. Her fingers lightly touched his back in a slow, steady pattern, as if she knew exactly what he needed. The air hostess whispered, almost in disbelief. "How?" The girl didn't answer. She just kept humming, softly, consistently, like a heartbeat. And then it happened. The crying stopped, not faded, not reduced, stopped. Complete silence. The baby blinked slowly. His tiny face, red from crying, softened. And for the first time since the flight began, he was calm. A collective gasp filled the cabin. "What? That's impossible. How did she do that?" Armin stood up slowly, his eyes locked on the girl, but now there was no arrogance in them, no dismissal, only one thing: shock. He stepped closer, careful, as if he didn't want to break whatever this moment was. The girl looked down at the baby. A faint smile appeared on her face. And then she whispered something so soft, only the baby could hear it, and the baby responded. A tiny movement, a small hand gripping her finger. Armin froze. Because that hadn't happened all day. Not with the nurses, not with the staff, not even with him. "Who are you?" His voice was different now, lower, less controlled, almost human. The girl looked up. For the first time their eyes truly met, and there was no fear in hers, no intimidation, just quiet strength. "I'm no one," she said softly, but that wasn't true, not anymore. Because in that moment, she was the only person on that plane who could do what millions of dollars couldn't. Armin stared at her, trying to understand. Trying to make sense of something that didn't fit into his world of logic and control. "Give him back!" The words came out automatically, a habit of authority, but there was hesitation behind them. The girl paused, not refusing, not resisting, but something in her expression changed, like she was thinking, weighing something deeper. Then she said something that made the air turn heavy. "He doesn't feel safe." Silence. Armin's jaw tightened. "What did you say?" The girl looked at the baby again, gently brushing his hair back. "He's not crying for no reason," she continued. "He's scared. That's ridiculous." Armin's tone hardened again, but it wasn't as strong as before, because deep down, something about her words felt uncomfortably real. The passengers shifted uneasily. No one dared interrupt, because this wasn't just about a crying baby anymore. This was something else, something deeper. The girl took a small breath. And then, without asking, without permission, she did something that shocked everyone again. She sat down right there, in Armin Khanna's seat. Holding the baby close as if she wasn't giving him back, gasps echoed. "Is she insane? Security? What is she doing?" Even the crew froze. Because no one sat in a billionaire's seat without consequences. Armin stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes, but before he could say anything, the girl spoke again, calmly, firmly. "If you take him right now," she looked straight at him, "he'll start crying again. A challenge, a quiet one but powerful, and for the first time in years, Armin Khanna didn't know what to do. Because something told him she wasn't wrong, and what she did next would shake him even more. The cabin was no longer just uncomfortable, it was tense, heavy. Like something invisible had taken control of the air. No one spoke. No one dared to move, because what was happening right now shouldn't have been happening at all. A poor girl sitting in a billionaire's seat, holding his child and refusing to give him back. Armin Khanna stood frozen, his fists clenched slightly, his jaw tight. This was new territory for him. In his world, people obeyed immediately, without question. Give him back! Each word was slow, controlled, dangerously calm. The girl didn't flinch, didn't argue. Didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at the baby, who was now resting quietly against her chest. His tiny fingers still wrapped around hers, his breathing soft, peaceful. Then she looked back at Armin. "If I do," she said gently, "he'll start crying again." A murmur spread across the cabin. "This is insane. She's crossing the line. Someone stop her." Two security men at the back of the jet exchanged glances. They started moving forward, slowly, carefully, waiting for Armin's signal. Armin noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed everything. His eyes flicked toward them, then back to the girl. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" he asked. The girl nodded slightly. Yes, that answer wasn't what he expected. No fear, no hesitation, just certainty. For a second, Armin almost felt challenged, not by power, but by something he couldn't control. The baby shifted slightly, letting out a soft, sleepy sound. Not a cry, not even a whimper, just comfort, and that changed everything, because Armin saw it clear as day. His son, who hadn't stopped crying for hours, was now calm, silent, at peace, and not in his arms. His breathing slowed. His anger didn't disappear, but it cracked, just a little. 5 minutes, Armin said finally, his voice low, tight. "You have 5 minutes." The security stopped. The tension didn't. The girl gave a small nod, not grateful, not surprised. Almost like she already knew he would say that. She adjusted the baby slightly, then did something even more unexpected. She began to speak to him, softly, almost like a whisper. "It's okay. You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." The words were simple. But the way she said them, it wasn't normal. It wasn't casual. It felt personal. Armin's eyes narrowed. There was something in her tone, something familiar, something that didn't make sense. "How do you know what he needs?" he asked suddenly. The girl paused just for a fraction of a second. Then she replied without looking up. "Because I've seen this before." A strange answer, too vague, too loaded. "Seen what?" Armin pressed. Now she looked at him. And this time there was something deeper in her eyes, something heavy, something painful. "A child who cries like this," she said slowly, "isn't just uncomfortable." The cabin was completely silent again. Even the passengers who had been complaining earlier were now listening. "They cry like this," she continued, "when something inside them feels wrong." Armin's chest tightened. He didn't like where this was going. "That's enough," he snapped. "You're overstepping." But the girl didn't stop. "They cry like this," she said, "when they don't recognize the world around them, when something important is missing. Stop. When they're not with the person they trust the most." "I said stop." The baby stirred slightly, but didn't cry. That was the part that scared Armin the most, because even with raised voices, even with tension rising, the baby stayed calm, as if he didn't care about anything else anymore, except her. Armin stepped closer, now just inches away. His voice dropped again, low, dangerous. "What are you trying to say?" The girl looked down at the baby, her thumb gently brushing his cheek. And then she said something that hit harder than anything before. "He doesn't know you." Silence, not shock, not confusion, just pure, crushing silence. It felt like the entire world had paused. Armin didn't react immediately. He just stood there, staring at her, because those 4 words, they weren't loud, they weren't aggressive, but they carried a truth he wasn't ready to face. "That's not possible," he said quietly, more to himself than to her, but the girl shook her head, gently. "When was the last time you held him like this?" she asked, no answer. "When was the last time you stayed with him while he cried?" Armin's throat tightened. "When was the last time," she continued softly, "you made him feel safe? Enough." But this time his voice didn't have the same power, because deep down he knew something was wrong. Not with the baby, with him. The girl adjusted the baby again, careful, protective. And then she did the one thing no one expected. She started singing. Not humming this time, singing. A soft lullaby. Old, simple, beautiful. The kind of song that didn't belong in a billionaire's world, but in small homes, quiet nights, and people who loved without conditions. The baby's eyes slowly closed. His breathing deepened, and within seconds he fell asleep, completely, peacefully. The cabin was frozen. No one could believe what they were seeing. Hours of crying ended in minutes. Armin stared at his son, then at the girl. And for the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't control. Not anger, not power, guilt. Because deep down, a question had started to form. What if this stranger understood his child better than he did? And what she would reveal next would destroy everything he believed about his own life. The baby was asleep, peacefully, silently. As if the storm that had shaken the entire plane had never existed. No cries, no tension, no chaos, just calm. And yet no one in that cabin felt at peace. Because what they had just witnessed didn't make sense. Armin Kana stood there unmoving, his eyes fixed on his son. Then slowly they shifted to the girl. She hadn't moved. Still sitting in his seat, still holding the child like he belonged there, like she belonged there. "Who are you?" This time his voice was different, not angry, not cold, searching. The girl didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the baby again, her fingers gently tracing his tiny hand as if memorizing it. For a moment, it felt like she didn't want to let go. "I told you," she said softly, "I'm no one." "That's not true." Armin stepped closer. "You don't calm a child like that by accident." Silence. "You knew exactly what you were doing," he continued. "You knew what he needed." A pause, his voice dropped slightly. "Why?" The girl finally looked up, and this time there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Pain, not loud. Not dramatic, but deep, old, unhealed. "Because I've seen him before." The words hit the air quietly, but their impact was anything but quiet. Armin's expression hardened again. "What does that mean?" The girl hesitated, as if crossing a line she had been avoiding. Then she asked something unexpected. "What's his name?" Armin frowned. "You don't need to know that." The girl gave a faint, almost sad smile. "But I already do." A chill ran through the cabin. Armin's eyes sharpened instantly. "How?" The girl looked down at the baby again and whispered, "Ayan." The name echoed in the silence. Armin's heart skipped because that was his son's name, Ayan Kana. And he had never told her. "How do you know that?" His voice dropped dangerously, but instead of answering directly, the girl said something else, something that made everything feel heavier. "He used to like this song." Armin froze. "Used to?" The girl continued softly, almost like she wasn't even talking to him anymore. "Whenever he cried," she said, "this song would calm him down." Her fingers gently moved across the baby's back in the same rhythm as before. "And he would hold on like this," she added, noticing the baby's grip on her finger. "Like he didn't want to let go." Armin's breathing became uneven, because every word she was saying was true. "But impossible. How do you know all this?" he demanded. The girl finally looked at him properly, and this time there was no hesitation. "Because," she took a slow breath, "I was there." Silence. Complete, unbreakable. Armin stared at her, trying to process, trying to reject it. "That's not possible," he said, but his voice wasn't convincing anymore. The girl's eyes softened. "You weren't," she said quietly. The words weren't loud, but they hit harder than anything else. "You weren't there." Armin felt something inside him crack, memories, fragments. Moments he had buried, ignored, avoided, late nights at work, endless meetings, missed calls, unanswered cries, and a hospital room, cold, silent. His wife, gone. After that, everything had changed. He had told himself he was doing what was necessary, building, protecting, providing, but now standing in front of this stranger, none of that felt enough. "Who are you?" he asked again. But this time, it sounded like a plea. The girl looked at the baby, then back at him. "I used to work," she said slowly, "at the care center where he stayed." Armin's mind went blank for a second. "Care center?" "Yes," she continued. "When he was just a few weeks old." "That's impossible," Armin snapped. "He's always been under professional care." The girl nodded. "Exactly." A pause. "And I was one of those people." The truth landed. Heavy, unavoidable. Armin stepped back slightly. A memory surfaced, something small. Something he had never paid attention to. A report. A recommendation. A name he had ignored, because to him they were all just staff, replaceable, forgettable, but to the baby they were. "You," Armin whispered. The girl gave a faint nod. "I was the one who stayed when he cried at night," she said. "I was the one who held him when no one else had time." Her voice didn't rise, didn't accuse, but every word felt like one. "I was the one who sang to him," she added softly. "The same song, the same rhythm, the same comfort." Armin looked at his sleeping son, then at her, and for the first time everything made sense. Why the baby had calmed down, why he had stopped crying, why he held onto her like that, because to him she wasn't a stranger, she was home. And what she would reveal next would shake Armin even deeper. The word home hung silently in the air, not spoken but felt by everyone. Armin Kana stood there staring at the girl as if seeing her for the first time. Not as a stranger, not as someone beneath him, but as someone who had been part of his son's life in a way he never was. His voice came out low, almost unrecognizable. "You worked there?" The girl nodded gently, her eyes never leaving the baby. "I didn't just work there," she said softly. "I stayed." A pause, heavy, meaningful. "When the shifts ended, I stayed. When the others got tired, I stayed. When he wouldn't stop crying," her voice softened even more. "I stayed." Each word felt like a quiet echo of everything Armin hadn't done. The passengers in the cabin were no longer judging, no longer whispering. They were watching, listening. Because this wasn't about status anymore. This was something deeper, something real. Armin swallowed hard. "Why?" he asked, a simple question, but it carried confusion and something else. Something fragile. The girl finally looked up at him, and for the first time there was a small, broken smile on her face. "Because no one stayed for me." Silence. Those words didn't just explain her actions, they revealed her. "I know what it feels like," she continued quietly, "to cry and have no one come." Armin felt something twist inside his chest. "I grew up in places like that," she said, "rooms full of children, and no one to call their own." Her fingers gently tightened around the baby's hand. "So when he cried like that," she whispered, "I couldn't walk away." The cabin felt smaller now, heavier, because suddenly this wasn't just about a baby, it was about abandonment, loneliness, and the invisible distance between people, even when they were physically close. Armin ran a hand through his hair, something he hadn't done in years, a sign of losing control. "I paid for the best care," he said defensively. "The best doctors, the best staff, but not yourself." The words cut through him instantly, not loud, not aggressive, but painfully precise. Armin froze because there was no argument, no defense, just truth. The girl looked down again, her voice softer now, almost like she regretted saying it. "He doesn't need perfect care," she said. "He needs someone who feels like safety." The baby stirred slightly in her arms, but didn't wake up. Armin watched that small movement as if it meant everything. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" he asked suddenly. The girl hesitated. "They tried," she said quietly, a pause, "but you were busy." That word again, busy, a word Armin had used his entire life. As an excuse, as a shield, as a reason, but now it sounded empty, completely empty. The plane was silent, no engine noise, no whispers, just the weight of realization. Armin slowly sat down. Not in his seat, but across from her. At the same level, something he had never done before, not with employees, not with strangers, but she wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was someone who knew his son, understood him, cared for him in ways money never could. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl paused, then finally answered. "Zara." Armin nodded slowly, as if memorizing it. "Zara," he repeated. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Armin looked at his son again, sleeping peacefully, still holding on to her, and something inside him shifted. "Deeply, I didn't know," he said quietly. And for the first time it wasn't an excuse. It was a confession. Zara didn't respond immediately. Because sometimes there's nothing to say to a truth that arrives too late. After a few seconds, she carefully stood up, walking toward him. The entire cabin tensed again. Because now the moment had come. Would she give the baby back or not? Zara stopped right in front of him, looking down at Ion, then at Armin. Her expression softened. And very gently, very carefully, she placed the baby back into his arms. Everyone watched closely, waiting. The moment stretched. Armin held his son, awkwardly at first, then a little more firmly. The baby shifted slightly. A small sound escaped his lips. The entire cabin held its breath. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, no crying, just calm. Ion remained peaceful. And that's when Armin realized something. It wasn't just about who was holding him, it was about how. For the first time, Armin adjusted his grip, gently supporting the baby's head. Just like Zara had done, his movements were slower now, more careful, more present, and somehow it worked. Zara watched quietly, a faint smile on her face. "You see," she said softly. "He just needed to feel you." Armin looked at her, and for the first time in his life he felt small, not because of power, but because of truth. And what he said next, no one on that plane expected. The cabin was completely silent, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one wasn't filled with irritation or arrogance or discomfort. This silence was different. It was heavy, emotional, because something had changed. Not just in the baby, not just in the girl, but in Armin Kana. He stood there holding his son, carefully, gently. Like he was afraid to break something fragile. Ayan slept peacefully in his arms. No cries, no fear, and for the first time, Armin wasn't trying to fix anything. He wasn't giving orders. He wasn't thinking about business. He was just there, present. His eyes slowly lifted to Zara. She was standing a few steps away now, quiet, invisible again to everyone else. Like she was ready to disappear the moment this was over. "Wait!" The word came out suddenly. Zara stopped. She turned back slowly. Armin stepped closer, still holding Ayan. For a moment he didn't speak, because there were no words strong enough to cover what he was feeling. Guilt, regret, realization. "I was wrong." The entire cabin froze. Because men like Armin Kana don't say things like that, ever, but he did. "I thought providing everything was enough," he continued. "My time, my presence," his voice faltered slightly. "I treated them like optional things." Zara didn't interrupt, didn't react, because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about a father finally understanding his child. Armin looked down at Ayan again, his expression softer than it had ever been. "I didn't even realize," he whispered, "that he didn't know me." The words hurt, even to say. Zara took a small step forward. "It's not too late," she said gently. Armin looked up at her. There was no judgment in her eyes, no anger, just honesty. "Children don't need perfect people," she continued. "They just need someone who stays." That word again, stays. Armin nodded slowly, as if promising himself something. Then he did something no one expected. "Come with us." Zara blinked. "I want you to stay," he said, "in his life." A wave of whispers spread across the cabin. "Is he serious? After all this? That girl?" But Armin didn't care. For the first time, he truly didn't care what anyone thought. Zara hesitated. This wasn't just an offer. This was a completely different world, a world that had never accepted people like her. "I don't belong there," she said quietly. Armin shook his head. "That's where you're wrong." He looked at Ayan, then back at her. "He does." Silence, because that answer was bigger than anything else. It wasn't about money, or status, or power. It was about connection. Zara's eyes filled slightly, but she didn't let the tears fall. "I'll stay," she said softly, "but not for you." A pause. "For him." Armin nodded. "That's enough." The plane began its descent, but no one noticed, because something far more important had already landed. A realization, a change, a second chance. Minutes later, as the jet touched the ground, Armin Kana walked out differently than he had walked in. Not as a billionaire, not as a man in control of everything, but as a father learning for the first time how to be one. And beside him walked a girl the world had ignored, but who had just done the impossible. She didn't have money, she didn't have power. But she had something far greater. She had a heart that stayed. And sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. Sometimes it's not money that fixes things, not power, not status. Sometimes all it takes is someone who stays. Someone who listens, someone who understands, someone who cares, even when they don't have anything. That day on the plane, a billionaire learned something no amount of success had ever taught him: how to be a father. And a girl the world ignored proved something the world keeps forgetting, that the richest hearts are often found in the poorest lives. So next time you think someone is no one, remember this story. Because sometimes the person you overlook is the one who can change everything. If you want more shocking stories like this, subscribe now. Because the next story is something you won't believe.